Hey there. Welcome to Lead Fearlessly, Strategies of Confident Women Leaders, the podcast that will empower you to unleash your inner strength and embrace leadership with confidence. I'm your host, Katie Winchenbach, and I'm excited to have you join us as we dive into the experiences of extraordinary women who've shattered glass ceilings and redefined success on their own terms. Get ready to be motivated, challenged, and equipped with the tools and strategies to lead fearlessly in your own life and career. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Martha Gleason. Martha is a coach who works with women executives to help them find their authentic voice and really helps women confidently navigate the corporate world. So she is a perfect speaker to join us today. Martha, welcome.
Thank you, Katie. It's great to be here and thrilled to be having these important conversations. I think now more than ever, it's really important for women to find their authentic voice, especially in the workplace, at home, in the workplace, everywhere, really, because we're living in some pretty challenging times. And we know right out of the gate that women are not on a level playing field yet. We've made some tremendous progress, and that is to be overlooked. But we're still not on a level playing field. And yet the world and where we find ourselves, not just in the United States, but really globally, needs women's voices and needs women's wise and inclusive leadership. And so I'm really excited to be having this conversation today.
And tell our audience a little bit about how you got to your current position working with career women.
I'm happy to share that, Katie. I started in the performing arts. So I was a theater major at UCLA in Los Angeles, and I was training in musical theater and acting. I have a minor in music as well as a major in theater. And I was working very, very hard to excel in my performing career. And I had a fair amount of success, and I was really good at showing up and winning and competing and winning, I should say, in that order. But what I found through that performance journey was, yes, I was finding my voice. Yes, I was learning how to be on stage and how to be effective while being on stage, but I wasn't really finding myself. I wasn't finding my own voice. And that started to happen for me when I took a worldwide shipboard educational program through something called Semester at Sea. And that is a 90-day sail where you completely circumnavigate the globe on a ship. And you're in school while you're doing it. So you're taking classes, you're studying. I was singing and doing theater and studying the theater of all the countries I was going to. But the world became our classroom. And I think you saw me talk about that, Katie, when I was speaking for Women Standing Together, that as I took that trip and I sailed around the globe, I had a lot of light bulb moments, and I found my mindset expanding to include not just my own reality of competing and winning on the stage, but other people's realities. What was it like to hear different languages, see different ways of dressing, understanding other people's spiritual journeys and their foods and all the things that I had never experienced before. So I sort of stepped out of the black box, as you would say, and experienced the world in a much bigger way. And that was the very, very beginning of me realizing that there was a whole lot more to life than just competing and winning, and that in doing so, I could start to coach others and help them to find their authentic voice. And it's just been, over 20 years of doing this work, and it's such a joy to help people realize their full potential.
And I love that you talk about your authentic voice. Authenticity is something that I've always felt is really, really important for leadership. So how can someone who is a younger leader really start to find what feels authentic to them?
That's a fantastic question. In the Women's Voice Network, which I founded this year, we are a new network of women executives who are essentially having real conversations, offering each other real support, and learning from each other's stories so that we feel like we're not in it alone. Many of my corporate clients feel isolated within their own organizations. And so that's why I started the Women's Voice Network. And in the Women's Voice Network, we're really dedicated to finding our authentic voice. And one of the very first things that you need to do is understand your core values. So it's not what are your company's core values. You need to know those for sure too, but you have to do that deep dive so that you understand what is really important to me. Once you drill down on that and you really get into that deeper work, you can start to understand, okay, this is what's important to me. Now, how do I align my messaging and my brand and my leadership? How do I align it with what really matters to me? So we spent quite a bit of time on understanding the core values. We also focus on the Clifton strengths. So some of your audience may have taken their Clifton strengths. I always encourage my clients to dive into those because once you understand these are strengths you don't have to work on. They're just yours. You don't have to develop them. You simply have to be more aware of them and learn how to leverage them because your strengths are you. So that immediately brings you into alignment with who you really are. We really lean heavily on the core values and the Clifton strengths.
And as you start doing that, I know for a lot of folks, when you dig into being authentic, it can be really nerve-wracking to put yourself out there and worry about the judgment of others. How do you recommend for younger women that they build that confidence in themselves and in their strengths?
I think that's a really important point that you're bringing up is that, we live in a world that really promotes judgment. We are told over and over by our media channels, by the things we see on television, by the things we see in magazines, that we essentially are what we have. We are what we do, and we are what other people say about us. When in fact, we really aren't any of those things. We are independent of other people's judgments. So you have to learn and really cultivate your own value, your own worth, almost on a moment-to-moment basis. You have to nurture it. So we use a lot of affirmations in the Women's Voice Network. We use a lot of worksheets that dive into why am I caught up in perfectionism and people-pleasing? What are the root causes of that? And we use an exercise, one of my favorite exercises is the mind map exercise, where we start to draw, we take a blank piece of paper, draw a circle or an object in the center of that, and we put in a main obstacle that we face in perhaps being more authentic. So whether it's, maybe you're afraid that you're not good enough. Maybe you're afraid, maybe a former boss told you would never be a good leader. That actual client story that I have, one of my executive clients is now actually in the C-suite, but she and her former organization was told that she would never be a good leader. And she carried that with her for quite some time until slowly we were able to work together to help her understand where did that come from? Well, it came from that former that former employer saying you'll never be a good leader. And as you start to sort of decode, where do these limiting self-beliefs, I like to call them, like we automatically say, well, I can't do that. Well, Katie, you and I have talked about why wouldn't you? But you have to, why wouldn't you go for it? Why wouldn't you do that cliff jumping move? But you have to understand where the limiting self-belief comes from. And that's where working with a coach or a therapist can really be helpful, because we all have these subconscious, unconscious, and conscious limiting self-beliefs that we literally have to get past before we can move into our superpowers.
And as women are starting to do that work, I mean, it really is work. And I think, and I love that we talk about that, because I think that is one thing that can be frustrating for a lot of women, is feeling like they're not seeing the progress that they want. And I think it's really important to remember, you mentioned working with a coach, working with a therapist. Leadership really is a journey.
It absolutely is. And I think it's important to realize that it is a journey, not a destination. You will see progress, but you have to roll up your sleeves, find and support spaces and places that are going to get you where you want to go. And you need strategies and tools. You need to understand. So one thing I share a lot with my clients is mind-body tools, because I've been practicing mind-body tools for 25 years, and I have a certification in that. So I give my clients strategies and tools that are actually proven to work. So we know that if we do X, Y, and Z with the breath, it's going to calm down the central nervous system. We know that if we use targeted affirmations that are written in a very specific way, and that they are said in a specific way that address all the levels of consciousness in the brain, that you're going to see results in them. But it's those specific tools, strategies, and then putting them to practice. And as you said, Katie, it is a practice. You will start to see those shifts. I also work with singing students, and I was teaching one of my singers a strategy because she was feeling very nervous about an upcoming performance. And I gave her a breathing technique that is time-tested and well-proven and well-validated. And she used that breathing technique. And she came back to me after the performance, and I said, how did you do? Did it work? Did you use the breathing technique, and did it work? She said, it was magic. It was like magic. I felt calm. I felt centered. I delivered my best performance. So you've got to have really rock star strategies and tools, and then you got to practice them. You have to use them.
And you've mentioned the Women's Voice Network and having a group of women. Maybe explain a little bit more for some folks who haven't been part of a coaching group or a group like that, why it's so important to find a group that you can lean on when you're facing some tough situations and building your leadership.
It's very important for a variety of reasons. And the first one I'm going to say is the very reason I started it was that many of my executive women clients were feeling isolated. It's really hard to find that group within your own organization because you can't always be transparent. You oftentimes have to be mindful, is somebody in a position that's ahead of me listening to something that I want to share that's really vulnerable? So, and again, the very first thing is it's important that whatever coaching group you go with is outside your own organization so that you can feel like you can really be transparent with what you need help with. The second reason it's important is that we can't do anything alone. as human beings, the study of neuroscience has showed us time and again, we need other people to excel. We are always better together, which is what's so brilliant about what you're doing, Katie, with Women Standing Together. You need a community of people who have your back. And that's what the Women's Voice Network is for the folks that are in that. The other thing is that we really learn from each other. They're not just learning from me as the coach. They're learning from each other because they're sharing stories and brainstorming. Like, when this happens with your team, what did you do and how did you solve that? A recent conversation came up, and Katie, you were part of this conversation, was that how do you show up more authentically at work, bringing your whole self to the job and not compartmentalizing other parts of yourself? And so we had a very interesting conversation around how can you bring your whole self to work and still, yes, we need filters at work. We're not going to show up in our pajamas, and talk the same way we do to our partners on the couch. But we certainly need to bring as much of ourselves as we can to whatever we do, because the more real we are, the more people relate to us. And so that's the power of the group too, is we can bounce ideas around like that.
And I love that idea of having a group to do that, because I think that is always a bit of a tension of how much of my authentic self should I be bringing to work versus what can be reserved for home life. And I think so many people working remotely, that's gotten a little bit blurred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it has, because we are in our homes, right? And so there's also the problem of, I think, organizations sometimes, depending on the culture of the organization you're working in. I've had some clients who said, well, you're working at home, therefore you ought to be able to answer emails at 7 and 8 o'clock at night. Because we know you're home, we know you're there. We expect you to be available. And so one thing we're doing in the Women's Voice Network next week is we're going to be talking about boundaries. How do you set healthy boundaries with your team, with your work, with your partner, with your kids? How do you set up those boundaries so that you are in alignment with your own priorities and you're taking care of yourself? You're putting your own oxygen mask on first, I like to say, before helping everybody else. So there's a whole lot of things that have to be addressed when you talk about working from home, because I've experienced that myself with a boss who, used to like to call me at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Can we have a conference call at 10 o'clock on Sunday night? And I'm like, that just doesn't work for me, So I think going back to those core values and those strengths, and also, what does your happiness pie look like? What's your delicious pie recipe look like? What does happy look like for you? Really understanding that. We work with that as well on the Women's Voice Network. How much do you want work to be a part of your life? How much time do you want for these other things? And what are those other things that are important to you?
And let's talk a little more about boundaries, because I think that is something I know personally I have struggled with. And I know from being part of other women's organizations, that tends to be a huge challenge, because a lot of women are concerned if they do set boundaries, are they, how is that going to be perceived? And are they taking themselves out of the running for future opportunities? So how have you personally balanced those things? How have you counseled clients on setting boundaries while still setting yourself up for advancement?
That's such a great question. Again, I think you have to look at the totality of your life. We do want to advance. We do want to excel. But I think it's important to remember the why underneath it. And Katie, you and I have had a conversation about this. Why are you doing what you're doing? If you are deeply connected to your inner why, your purpose, for example, the reason that I love helping my women executive clients find their voice is that my core values are that I like to work with purpose and I like to help other people achieve their full potential. So I'm in alignment when I'm doing that work and it's meaningful for me, which is why it's my why. That's why I do it. So once you start to understand your why, then you can say, you know, I want to advance, but this is why I want to advance. And at the same time, I'm also looking at my happiness pie chart here and realizing that time with my kids or time with my partner, if I am partnered, is really foundational to my happiness pie. It's a key ingredient. So therefore, I'm willing to do this, but I'm not willing to do that. Right? So it's understanding where the boundaries are. So for instance, I'll give you a story about this. I was going to a concert on Sunday, this past Sunday, and a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine from Los Angeles, texted me at the last minute and said, hey, this is just very last minute, but we're really literally driving through your town. We'd love to meet up with you if you can swing it. And in the moment, I was thinking, okay, do I drop going to the concert and drop everything to be with this friend who's just now texting me, right? Or do I say to her, I'd love to see you swing by the cafe where I am. We can have that quick visit, and then I'm going to still go to my concert. And I marinated on it a little bit, right? I thought about what's in alignment for me here. What's giving me that strong yes feeling? What's giving me that? No, I don't think so. And I opted to go to the concert. And it was because I knew that I had made these plans. My husband was going to go with me. The music conductor wanted to meet me. And I knew it was important for me to be at that concert. And so I chose that, but I still had a quick, meaningful visit with my friend. So one thing you can do, and this is a tip that I give my clients, is when you're faced with a decision that involves a boundary, setting a boundary, is it a strong yes? If it's not a strong yes, it's a no.
That is incredible. What a great question for us to be able to ask ourselves. And I think I know a lot of times I waffle on the fence and I'm like, should I? And I get that should word stuck, and end up going along with things that definitely are not a enthusiastic yes, but fulfilling kind of those expectations that I've put on myself.
That's it. We put them on ourselves, and we also think we want to be viewed favorably by others. Right? So, but really, if you really listen to your gut, on a gut level, is this a strong yes? It's going to tell you the right thing to do. The body is an incredible barometer. If you're getting a yes, we're going to do this, it feels right, I'm going for it, then you have your answer. But if you are in that waffling space, that right there tells you, I don't really feel a strong yes. That means it's a no. And I'm not going to worry so much about how I'm perceived because I don't show up to the event, or I don't do this, or I don't do that. I'm just going to follow what's right for me. I'm going to stay in my lane and put guardrails around my own time and energy.
And this ties in so well to a question that I hear a lot of at events, which is kind of how do I become successful? How do you achieve success? And one of the things that I'm really hearing from talking to you that I think is important to emphasize is that there is no one definition of success.
That's right. Because I think if you start to measure your success in worldly terms, which is you are going back to, you are what you have, you are what you do, you are what other people say about you. If you start to measure your success by those barometers, it will never, ever, ever work. Because success is really a state of satisfaction. It's a feeling of happiness within your own self, saying, I did the best I could. I showed up and helped other people where and when I could, right? I was a good partner. I was a good mom. If you have children, I was a good daughter. However that works. I did my best. But in the end, it's, am I happy? Did I live a happy life? Am I living a happy life? And if you have that feeling of contentment, that's an interesting word to consider. When we're content, we're not always looking for the next thing, right? I'm not saying don't advance and don't grow. We're all climbing this life mountain together, right? But if you can feel content while you're doing it because you are in alignment with your priorities, that's success.
This has been such a productive conversation, and I feel like we've covered so many really hot button topics. So to kind of tie a little bow around all of this, Martha, if you could give one piece of advice to your clients when they come to you, to your younger self at the start of your leadership journey, what is that kind of best piece of advice that you have to share?
Well, it's actually a line from a Shakespeare play. Here's my theater background speaking. It's to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true. When you are spending time and giving focus to your own, navigating your own inner emotional journey, then you're starting to say, I get what's important to me. And I can come to a crossroad and know which way to turn because I'm in alignment with my purpose. Why am I here? What are my special superpowers? Oh, I came to serve in this way or in that way, right? So once you start to get to know yourself, the more you know yourself, you know your superpowers, you know your strengths, and you start to anchor into that, and you stay true to that, to thine own self be true, then you can to live that happy, content life and let the world be the world, right? We don't have any control over what's happening outside of us most of the time, but we do have control over our own state of being and how we really navigate our ship. Where is the rudder pointed and keeping our inner compass pointed at true north?
Martha, thank you for all of that. That was so wonderful, and I greatly appreciate your time sharing all of that with us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Katie. And I appreciate, you should be so proud of the work you're doing on this podcast, because this conversation and many, many others will really support and speak to the women that you are serving and help them to know and feel that they are not alone on this journey.
Thank you, Martha. And thank you again for joining us.
Of course. Thank you.
To connect with Martha and learn how you can join the Women's Voice Network, visit her website, marthagleasonvoice.com. Thanks for tuning in to Lead Fearlessly, Strategies of Confident Women Leaders. If you've been inspired by today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a friend who could use a confidence boost. Remember to subscribe so you won't miss out when we drop our next season. And if you found our conversations valuable, please leave us a 5-star review. Your support helps us continue to amplify the voices of incredible women leaders and inspire more fearless female trailblazers.